Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Nazir. We are up to Perek Chet Mishna Alayev. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israel, Ovchana bad Miriam, and Sason ben Raya, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Le'avdir ben Chaim lechaim, v'derefua shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shah Cholei Israel. The following chapter deals with situations in which a Nazir is uncertain if he became tameh from a corpse. The Mishnah will teach how the Nazir concludes his Nazirut in such situations. The uncertainty creates two major problems for the Nazir. On the one hand, a Nazir who becomes tameh must shave his head before he can begin counting his term of Nazirut again. On the other hand, a Nazir who is not tameh is forbidden to shave his head until his term ends. So a Nazir who is uncertain whether he is tameh faces a difficulty in finishing his term. He cannot shave his head because he may be tahor, and he cannot complete his Nazirut because he needs to shave his head in order to start counting his term of Nazirut again. A second problem facing the Nazir is which set of offerings to bring. A Nazir who is tameh brings one set of offerings, while a Nazir who is tahor and concluding his term brings a different set of offerings. A Nazir shaving for his tumah brings two birds. One is a chatat and one is an olah, and a lamb is an Nashim offering. A Nazir who is tahor and concluding his term brings a male lamb as an olah, a female lamb as a chatat, and a ram, an adult male sheep as a shlamim offering. These are all obligatory offerings. However, a person cannot bring an obligatory offering unless he is obligated to do so. A person can consecrate, he can make holy an obligatory offering only if he is required to bring it. If he is not, the holiness does not take effect on the animal or bird, and if he offers in the temple, he is guilty of offering chulin ba'azara, an unconsecrated offering in the temple courtyard, which is forbidden. Since this person does not know which set of offerings he is obligated to bring, it would seem that he cannot bring either of them. Our Mishnah will explain how such a Nazir solves these problems and concludes his Nazirut. Several solutions will be offered in this Mishnah and the next. The basic approach of all the solutions is to arrange things in such a way that the Nazir may shave whether he is tameh or tahor. Similarly, with his offerings, things are arranged in such a way that he can bring at least some of his offerings, enough to allow him to shave and conclude his Nazirut. Some of these arrangements are quite complicated, so to simplify them as much as possible, we are going to follow the arts elucidated, which have not discussed certain secondary issues. Shnei Nazirim shamar le'en echad. If two Nazirim were standing together and someone was watching them from a distance, said to them, Re'iti echad mikem shenitma ve'eni yodea eze mikem. I saw that one of you became tameh from a corpse related to ma, but I do not know which one of you became tameh. For example, he said, I saw a piece of a corpse fall between you and touch one of you, but I cannot tell which one of you it touched. As a result, each Nazir is now in doubt whether he became tameh or is still tahor. The one who became tameh must now shave, bring the offerings for the shaving of tumah, and start counting his Nazirut over again. The one who is still tahor is forbidden to shave now until he finishes his term of Nazirut when he must bring the offerings for the shaving of Tara. Since neither one knows what to do, because the Mishnah speaks of a case where neither of the Nazirim contradict the witnesses, they simply don't know. In such a case, a single witness is believed to say that one of them became tameh. So since they don't know what to do, they should adopt the following procedure. They continue to observe the laws of Nazirut until 30 days have passed from the time they began their Nazirut. The Mishnah discusses a case where both Nazirim accepted a standard 30-day Nazirut. Since one of them is tahor, neither of them can shave until his term is finished. At the end of these 30 days, migalchin, they shave their heads, since this is now permitted whether they are tameh or tahor. At this point, the one who is tahor shaves to conclude his Nazirut, the shaving of Tara, while the one who is tameh shaves to be able to start counting his Nazirut again. Umevi'in korban tumah ve'korban tara, and they bring between them the offering for tumah and the offering for tara. They do not each bring two sets of offerings, rather they bring two sets between them. Now the expressions, the offering of tumah and the offering of tara, refer to the three offerings in each set. The Omer, one of the Nazirim, then says to the other, if I am the one who is tameh and you are the one who is tahor, korban tumah sheli vekorban tara shelach. Then the offering for tumah is mine and the offering for tara is yours. But if I am the one who is tahor and you are the one who is tameh, korban tara sheli vekorban tumah shelach. Then the offering for tara is mine and the offering of for tumah is yours. So the one who was tameh can now start counting his Nazirut over again, while the one who was tahor has concluded his Nazirut. However, we still do not know which one of them has completed his term and which has now just begun to count his term. They therefore must do the following. Sofrin 30 yom, they now count another 30 days of Nazirut. Because again, we're discussing, Mishnah is discussing a case where both Nazirim accepted a 30-day term, so the term that is now repeated is also 30 days. And at the end of these 30 days, they bring between them the offering for Tara to conclude this new Nazirut count. They must also each shave at this point because this is a requirement for concluding Nazirut. Our Mishnah follows the view of the first Tana in chapter 6, Mishnah 9, who requires the Nazir to complete all the rituals in order to be finished with his Nazirut. This, however, presents a problem since one of them was not really Nazir during the second 30-day term. It is forbidden for him to shave his entire head, since a man may not shave the corners of his head, is peot, as it says in Vayikra, chapter 19, verse 27. It is only a definite Nazir who may do so, since his positive mitzvah to shave overrides the prohibition forbidding this, but a questionable Nazir may not. We must therefore say that the Mishnah discusses a case where the Nazirim were women or children who are not subject to this prohibition and may shave their heads, even if they are not sure that they must do so. However, if the Nazirim were adult men, they are forbidden to shave their head out of doubt, as Tosfot Rabbi Akiva Egel say on page 57b in Masechet Nazir. Now, since only the one who was originally Tameh is finishing this new count, only one set of offerings is brought, and it is designated for the correct Nazir in the following way. V'omer, one of the Nazirim say to the other, Im ani hu tameh, if I am the one who was tameh and you are the one who was tahor, korban tumah sheli v'korban tara shelach v'zeh korban tarati. Then the offering for tumah that was brought previously at the end of the first set of 30 days was mine. The offering for tara that was brought then was yours and concluded your Nazirut, and this offering of tara being brought now is mine to conclude my new count of Nazirut. But if I am the Nazir who was tahor and you are the one who was tameh, korban tara sheli v'korban tumah shelach v'zeh korban taratach. Then the offering of tara that was brought previously was mine and concluded my Nazirut, and the offering of tumah that was brought then was yours, and you began to count your new term and have concluded it in tara, so that this offering of tara being brought now is yours to complete your Nazirut. In this way, both of them successfully complete their terms of Nazirut and make their offerings. Now, the Mishnah discusses a case where the procedure just outlined cannot be used. Met echad mehen, if one of the Nazirim died before they had a chance to act on the procedure that the Mishnah said earlier, what should the surviving Nazir do? Amar Rabbi Yehoshua said, Yivakesh echad min hashuk she'idol kenegdo benazir. The surviving Nazir should look for someone in the street who will vow to be a Nazir opposite him, meaning who is interested in becoming a Nazir, and who will agree to accept his Nazirut under the special conditions the Mishnah will now say. Ve'omer, and the surviving Nazir says to him, Im tameh arei ata Nazir miyad. If I was the one of the original Nazirim who became tameh, you should become a Nazir right now for 30 days. So if he is indeed tameh, he will not be counting his Nazirut for the next 30 days, since he has not yet shaved and brought offerings for his tumah. But the new person will be counting, since his Nazirut will have taken effect immediately. But if I am the one who was tahor, you should become a Nazir after 30 days, meaning your Nazirut should first begin 30 days from now and continue for 30 days after that. So as a result of this arrangement, they will not both be counting their terms of Nazirut at the same time. The new Nazir will be counting his term of Nazirut either when the surviving Nazir is tameh and not counting, or after the surviving Nazir has finished counting and completed his term. At any one time, only one of them will be counting and completing his term. So in practice, however, the new Nazir will have to observe the laws of Nazirut for 60 days, since he will not know if his Nazirut started right away or after 30 days. So after the first 30 days, only one of them will be concluding his Nazirut and be obligated to bring Tara offerings, and they can bring these offerings for whichever one really needs it. And this is arranged in the following way. So, Sofrin 30 yom, they first count 30 days, so that if the new Nazir actually became a Nazir right away, his term has ended. Under the terms of their agreement, if the surviving Nazir was really Tameh, the new Nazir becomes a Nazir right away. So at the end of 30 days, both of them must bring offerings and shave. The surviving Nazir for his Tumah, and the new Nazir for completing his term of Nazirut. Umevi'in korban tumah v'korban tara, and they then bring an offering for tumah and an offering for tara. The offering for tumah is brought by the surviving Nazir himself, so that if he was tameh, he can now restart his Nazirut count, while the offering for tara is brought by both Nazirim together. The new Nazir has no part in the tumah offerings, since he certainly was not tameh, unlike the case of the previous case of the Mishnah, where one of them was surely tameh. The Omer, the surviving Nazir then says to the new Nazir, if I am the one of the original Nazirim who was Tameh, Korban Tumah Sheli v'Korban Tara Shalach, the offering for Tumah is mine and the offering of Tara is yours, since you became a Nazir immediately and have just finished your term of Nazirut. Korban Tara Sheli v'Korban Tumah b'Safek. But if I am the one who was told, then I am the one now concluding my term and offering, the offering of Tara is mine, and you have just begun in Nazirut, and the offering for Tumah is brought in doubt. Meaning, although if I am told there is no need for a Tumah offering, I must nevertheless bring it since I do not know this and must suspect that I am Tameh. So the offerings for a Nazir Tameh are two birds, one is a Chatat, one is an Olah, plus a lamb is an Nashim. So a Chatat and a Nashim cannot be brought unless a person is obligated to bring them. So how can you bring the Tumah offering if you're unsure if that's your obligation? However, the bird Chatat is an exception to this rule, and it can be brought even in cases of doubt. So this Nazir brings his bird Chatat out of doubt without the Hasham. That's enough to allow him to start counting as his Zirut again. There is a question about bringing the bird Olah. That's discussed in the commentaries. Now, this takes care of any possible Tumah. At this point, the surviving Nazir is either beginning to count as Nazirut if he was Tameh before, or he has finished with his Nazirut if he is not Tameh. The new Nazir is just the opposite. Under the terms of their agreement, if the surviving Nazir is not counting as Nazirut, then the new Nazir is finished with his Nazirut. And if the surviving Nazir is finished with his Nazirut, then the new Nazir is counting his term of Nazirut. The Mishnah explains what to do. The Sofrin Shloshim Yom, they not count another 30 days because one of them is definitely a Nazir now. Mivin Korban Tara, and after this they bring between them another offering of Tara to conclude this additional Nazirut term. One offering is enough for both of them because only one of them is really obligated in this term. The Omer, the surviving Nazir says to the new Nazir, if I'm the one who was Tameh, Korban Tumah Sheli v'Korban Tara Shalach v'zeh Korban Tarati. The offering for Tumah brought previously at the end of the first 30 days was mine, and the offering for Tara that was brought then was yours, and conclude your Nazirut. And this offering for Tara that is being brought now is mine to conclude my Nazirut. But if I'm the one who was Tara, Korban Tara Sheli v'Korban Tumah b'Savek v'zeh Korban Toratach. Then the offering for Tara brought previously was mine to conclude my Nazirut, and the offering for Tumah that was brought at that time was offered in doubt, and this Tara offering being brought now is yours to complete your Nazirut. And again, here too, they must both shave their heads. Now, the next Tana rejects the solution as being impractical and gives a different solution instead. Amar lo ben Zuma said to Rabbi Yoshua, Umi shomea lo sheido kinegdo ben Nazir. Who will listen to the surviving Nazir to vow to become a Nazir opposite him, by making a Nazirut that has two possible starting dates, like you say? Nobody will want to accept such a Nazirut because he will then have to practice Nazirut for an extra 30 days in doubt, since he will not know if the Nazirut begins immediately or after 30 days. Ela mevi chatat ha'of ve'olad bema. Rather, the surviving Nazir should deal with this uncertainty on his own by doing the following. He should observe his original 30-day term and then bring a bird chatat for a Tumah offering in case he was Tameh. A bird chatat may be brought even in cases of doubt, and this one offering suffices to allow him to shave and begin his Nazirut again. This part of Ben Zuma's solution is the same as Rabbi Yeshua's. And an animal, a male lamb, is an olah for a Tara offering in case he was Tahol. Instead of finding someone else to join him and bring an offering of Tara together with him, Ben Zoma says he should bring on his own just one of the Tara offerings, the Olah. This is enough to allow him to shave in case he is really Tahor, as we learned in chapter 6, Mishnah 7. He cannot bring the Chatat of the Tara offering because that is a lamb, not a bird. An animal Chatat cannot be brought in the case of doubt, nor would it qualify for his Tumah offering since that Chatat must be a bird. He also cannot bring the Shlamim, even though it can be offered as a donated offering in case he is not Tahor, because the Nazir Shlamim must be accompanied by loaves of matzah, like we said in chapter 6, Mishnah 9, and these cannot be brought unless there is a clear obligation to bring them. Therefore, he brings only the Olah now, and the others after he finishes the second set of 30 days, like the Mishnah is going to explain. He must, however, bring the Olah now to allow him to shave his head in case he is Tahor. This, together with the bird Chatat he brings in case he was Tameh, allows him to shave whether he was Tameh or Tahor. The Omer, and he says, Im tamaiti achatad mechovati ve'olah nedava. If I was tameh, the bird chatat is part of my obligation to bring a tumah offerings, and the animal olah, which I am not obligated to bring now since I was tameh, is a voluntary offering. And olah can be brought as a voluntary offering. Therefore, it can be brought even in cases of doubt by stating that if there is really an obligation, it should be considered an offering for the obligation. If there is no obligation, it should be considered as a voluntary offering. Either way, the olah is valid. The chatat, however, cannot be brought in this way because a chatat cannot be brought as a voluntary offering. The But if I was ta'or, the olah will be offered as a part of my obligation to bring the Tara offerings, and the chatat, which I do not need since I was ta'or, is brought in doubt for the possibility that I may have been tameh. Now at this point, the person is certainly not a Nazir tameh anymore. He must still, however, account for the possibility that he had been tameh and must not count his Nazirut again. He therefore does the following. V'sofer 30 yom, he counts another 30 days of Nazirut because he might have been tameh and must now count his Nazirut term again. Umevi korban tahara, and he then brings the full offering for tahara, the olah, the chatat, and the shlamim to complete his Nazirut. If he had been tameh before, then he has just finished his new term in tahara, and all 3 offerings are for concluding his Nazirut. If he had been tameh, the olah he brought at the end of the first 30 days was brought before he began counting the new term of Nazirut, and it cannot count towards the tahara offering to conclude that term, so he must now bring another olah offering with the other offerings. On the other hand, if he had not been tameh, then his term ended 30 days ago when he brought the olah and shaved, but he still owes the chatat and shlamim from that set of offerings since he brought only the olah at that time. So the chatat and shlamim he brings now count for that. He does not, however, owe another olah since he already brought it at the end of the first 30 days. He must therefore make the olah conditional as follows. Vamer, he says, Im tameh ite olah rishona nedava v'zu chova. If I was tameh, then the first olah, the one brought at the end of the first 30 days, was a voluntary offering, and this olah is for my obligation and part of the Tara offerings for the conclusion of my Nazirut. But if I was ta'or, then the first olah, the one I brought 30 days ago, was for my obligation to bring an offering for Tara, and this olah that I'm bringing now is a voluntary offering, so it may be offered even if it is not a required offering, and this chatat and shlamim that I'm bringing now is the remainder of my Tara offering. So these together with the olah that I offered previously have now completed my Tara offerings. Now Rabbi Yeshua raises a difficulty with Ben Zomah's solution. Amar Rabbi Yeshua said, Nimtza ze mevi korbenotav lechatzaim. The result of this procedure is that this Nazir brings his Tara offerings in parts, because if he was Ta'or, he brought his olah at the end of the first 30 days, and the chatat and shlamim at the end of the second 30 days. And the Mishnah concludes, Aval odulu chachamim le Ben Zomah. However, the sages agreed with Ben Zomah that Nazir should do what he suggested, and there was no problem with bringing the Tara offerings at 2 separate times. The Gemara explains that Rabbi Yeshua also agrees that the offerings may be brought at separate times. He made his comment to teach his students that they should not be embarrassed to ask a question even when others may ridicule it. And the Rav therefore tells us, V'alacha ke Ben Zomah, the halacha does follow the opinion of Ben Zomah. We continue with Mishnah Bet. Having taught the law of a Nazir who is uncertain if he became tameh from a corpse, the Mishnah now deals with the case where in addition to this uncertainty, the Nazir is also in doubt whether he became a mitzorah. Since he might be a mitzorah, he must undergo a procedure to purify himself from it before he can continue his Nazirut count. Like we learned in chapter 7, Mishnah 3, the days during which he is a confirmed mitzorah and the days of his counting, the 7 days he counts for his purification after he is healed, do not count toward his Nazirut. This procedure requires him to shave his entire body, including his head, on 2 separate occasions. The purification procedure for a mitzvah on the day of Tzarat, on the day that Tzarat heals, consists of his undergoing a bird ritual in which 2 birds are taken by a Kohen. One of them is slaughtered and its blood collected in the bowl containing spring water, and the other is then dipped into the blood and together with certain other items used to sprinkle the mitzvah. The mitzvah's entire body is then shaved, and he immerses in a mikveh. He then waits 7 days and again shaves his body and immerses in a mikveh. He then brings offerings on the 8th day to complete his purification. On the other hand, if he is not a mitzvah, he is simply a Nazir who is not allowed to shave his head. In the case of a definite mitzvah, the mitzvah to shave his body overrides the prohibition for a Nazir to shave his head. However, if a Nazir is not sure he is a mitzvah, he is not allowed to shave his head like we saw in the previous Mishnah in regard to shaving for Tumah. He must therefore wait to do his shavings until he is permitted to shave, even if he is a Nazir. In order to find a way out of all of these doubts and purify himself from his possible tzarad, possible corpse Tumah, and conclude his Nazirut, this person must perform the various shaves he needs only on days when he is permitted to shave, no matter what he is, Mitzorah, Nazir Tameh, or Nazir Tahor. The Mishnah teaches how long it takes for him to complete his purification in this matter, and how much more time he needs to conclude his Nazirut. Nazir Shayat Tameh B'Safek, if a Nazir was in doubt whether he was Tameh from a corpse, Umukhrat B'Safek, and also in doubt whether he was a confirmed Mitzorah whose Sarad had healed, Ochel B'Kodeshim Achar 60 Yom, He may eat holy foods, meat from sacrificial offerings, only after 60 days from the beginning of his term. This is because he might be a healed mitzvah who is forbidden to eat sacrificial foods until he has brought his offerings. It says in Negaim, chapter 14, Mishnah 3. But before he can bring his offerings, he must first purify himself and shave his entire body twice. This presents a problem for him because he is also a Nazir, and a Nazir cannot shave unless he is sure that he is a mitzvah. As a result, he can shave only on days when shaving is permitted to him, whether or not he is a mitzvah. These days occur every 30 days. As in the previous Mishnah, we're speaking of a case where the Nazir accepted a standard 30-day term. Therefore, he must wait until the end of 30 days to be able to shave his head. At this time, he may also shave his entire body as a possible mitzvah. And it therefore takes him 60 days to accomplish the 2 body shaves of a mitzvah. At the end of the first 30 days, if he was not a mitzvah and not tameh from a corpse, then he is simply a Nazir who is completing his term, and he may now shave his head. Even if he is tameh from a corpse, he must also shave to begin counting his Nazirut over again. And if he is a mitzvah, then he is ready for the first of his 2 body shaves. Accordingly, he shaves not only his head, but his entire body. He must also bring offerings at the time he shaves in case he is not a mitzvah but a Nazir, either tameh or tahor. He therefore brings a bird chatat and an animal ought to take care of these possibilities like we learned in Mishnah 1. After this shave, he may not shave again for another 30 days because if he was either tameh from a corpse or a mitzvah, he is still a Nazir and forbidden to shave since neither of these people can complete their Nazirut until they become tahor. At the end of the second set of 30 days, he is again allowed to shave no matter what he is. If he was never really a mitzvah or tameh from a corpse and he finishes zirut at the end of the first 30 days and is now allowed to shave his head at any time. If he was tameh from a corpse but not a mitzvah, then his first shaving made him a Nazir tahor, and now at the end of the second 30 days he has finished counting his term of Nazirut and he shaves as a Nazir concluding his term. And if he is a mitzvah, then he is not permitted to perform his second body shave. Here too he must shave his body entirely. Although a mitzvah generally shaves for the second time 7 days after his first shaving, the second shaving is effective even if it occurs many days later. He can now finish the process of purifying himself from the possibility that he was a mitzvah by bringing his offerings on the next day after 6 days. However, since he is not sure he was a mitzvah, he cannot bring the regular mitzvah offerings of a chatat, ula, and Nashim. Instead, he brings a bird for his chatat. He brings his ula with the condition that if he is not a mitzvah, it should be a donated ula. He does not bring the Hashem at all because it cannot be brought as a donation. And in the case where he brings a bird for his chatat, he can do that because a bird chatat can be brought even in cases of doubt. Again, he brings his ula with the condition that if he is not a mitzvah, it should be a donated ula. He does not bring the Hashem at all because it cannot be brought as a donation. However, the lack of the Hashem does not prevent him from completing his purification from his tumah, and he may therefore eat holy foods. And in addition to these offerings, he must bring other offerings to account for the Nazir possibilities. He is then free to eat sacrificial fruits. Now, the Mishnah assumes that he has received the sprinkling to purify himself from corpse tumah at some point during these 60 days. Once he is no longer a mitzvah, he is permitted to eat sacrificial food. So at this point, he is definitely no longer a mitzvah, but he is still possibly a Nazir tamer, a Nazir tahor, since those days in which he is a mitzvah is purifying himself from being a mitzvah are not counted as Nazirut days. Therefore, he can drink wine and become tameh to the dead after 120 days from the beginning of the original Nazirut term. This is because he must now take care of the possibility that he was a Nazir who became tameh from a corpse and then conclude his Nazirut. If he was indeed tameh from a corpse, he must shave again before he can start his count of Nazirut. The shaving he did for possibly being a mitzvah is not considered a shaving for Nazir tameh because one shaving cannot serve to fulfill 2 shaving obligations. He must therefore wait another 30 days before he can shave for his possible tumah, since he might be a Nazir tahor and forbidden to shave. At the end of those 30 days, he shaves and brings a tumah offering, and then observes Nazirut for another 30 days to complete the count. The Mishnah discusses a case where he was in a state of doubtful tzarat on the first day of his original Nazirut term, so his Nazirut count was immediately suspended, and he must now observe a full 30 days of Nazirut. This takes another 60 days, like we learned in the previous Mishnah, so you cannot drink wine or become tameh to the dead until 120 days have passed, 60 plus 60. Now, we learned earlier that the purification for the possibility that he was a mitzvah takes 60 days. The Mishnah now explains why we do not permit the possible mitzvah to shave immediately. because the obligation to shave for the purposes of purifying a person from a tzarat affliction overrides the prohibition for a Nazir to shave only when the tzarat and its obligation to shave are certain. We learned this, the Gemara learns this from a verse, Second Nazir, page 58, A and B. But when the obligation of shaving is doubtful, such as in our case, it does not override the prohibition of a Nazir to shave. The reason a Nazir may shave if he has a mitzvah is because the positive commandment for him to shave overrides the prohibition for a Nazir to shave, what we call a Seder, as learned by the Gemara from the verse. If the person is not a mitzvah and has no obligation to shave, there is nothing to override the prohibition. Since we do not know whether he is a mitzvah, shaving cannot be allowed because it might violate the Nazir prohibition. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.